Ta-da. You're in the hot seat now. This morning's Dharma talk is by none other than Mark Shishin Gelula. Mark has been an integral part of our center since 2011, receiving Jukai in 2015. He has participated in so many capacities at our center, including board president. With a career spanning 38 years in the field of medical education, we are so grateful to have you here with us this morning, speaking to your talk entitled, As We Walk On By. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Junmai. Can you guys hear me? Give me a, no.
Yeah, we got a thumbs up. But yeah,
No, Susan went like this.
Oh, maybe it needs to be a little closer to your face.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, how's that though?
Good.
Okay. Thank you for coming. Wow, Roshi, I'm glad you began here in the center. And I guess everybody online too, mentioning Memorial Day, I too thought about it. Pat's dad was in the Pacific for, I don't know how many months, on a destroyer. And my dad was in England for 39 months. I don't know how those guys did it. The world owes something to them, and we need to think about that in this period that we're in right now, how people devoted themselves to others rather than to their own personal self-aggrandizement. Anyway, it looks like it's really going to rain here in a minute. This morning I opened my email and I saw my daily Dharma, and I wanted to read this to you. This is from Bell Hooks, the black activist. I think she's died how many years ago now? 2 years ago? This is, she says, to commit to love is fundamentally to commit to a life beyond dualism. That's why love is so sacred in a culture of domination, because it simply begins to erode your dualisms. Wow, love. Okay, so the talk that I'm giving is called As We Walk By. And I'm going to begin with a story. Last Monday morning, a week ago tomorrow, I was riding my bike along the Lakeshore bike path. I was heading south and I was right around Oak Street Beach when I saw a body stretched along the bike lane. As I approached, I saw a guy with his head leaning against the low concrete wall, separating the bike lanes from and the running path and the beach from easy access. In other words, preventing people from getting over onto Lakeshore Drive. It would be hugely dangerous. I stopped my bike. At first, I couldn't even see if he was breathing. But as I approached him and asked if he was okay, because I had looked at him, it looked like he was breathing, he looked at me. But he didn't answer me, so I asked him again, actually a few times, until he kind of grunted. I need to describe this man. His clothes were filthy. He was wearing one shoe, a boot. His shirt was in one piece, but his sweatpants had numerous holes. The sweatpants were untied and sat low, revealing his brown underwear. His eyes looked dazed, and I wonder if he was high on drugs or intoxicated with alcohol or some other problem. I continued to ask if he was okay and if he would get up so he wouldn't be so unsafe. Finally, he spoke to me. I don't remember what he said, but I told him we needed to get him up and away from there. He was actually grunting quite a bit. After urging him several times, he did agree and began to pull up his pants and tie them. That took quite a few minutes. All the while, riders were passing by. A woman had stopped to talk with a fireman with the fire department scuba team practicing in Lake Michigan. I caught up to that woman later, and she told me that she had seen the man and wanted the firemen to get him up. Of course, they can't do that unless he's a danger to himself or a danger to others, and he didn't appear to be. The man, you know, I see what the benefit of this is, but it's not me. I think I'm just going to do this, and we're going to move this out of the way, folks. Great idea, not for me. Thanks, Ken. There we go. Okay, let me go back here. So, where was I? Okay, so I never learned the guy's name, but he did agree to stand up. And he offered his hand, and when I pulled it, he screamed in pain. So he and I figured out that we shifted to, I pulled on his upper arm here, and he pushed down on one knee and tried to push with his other knee, his other leg, and he slowly got up. He was not a small man, and I'm not really that strong, but he did get up, and it was really clear that he was quite weak. After he was standing, somewhat unsteadily, but standing, I asked him again what was up. And I literally said that to him, "What's up?" And he said he had just finished 45 days of chemotherapy, and although maybe I was invading his privacy a little bit, I asked him what kind of chemotherapy he had. And he said, well, he had prostate cancer. And it was important for me to ask because I didn't know if he was in some other kind of crisis, you know, whether he needed pain meds and they had shifted, or who knows what, you know. He told me about the prostate cancer, and I told him I was sorry. And then he said he was really hungry. And he looked it and made a lot of sense to me. But I didn't have any money. I never carry any money when I'm riding on my bike, and I rarely carry any money anymore anyway because of credit cards. So I felt badly about that. But finally I asked him, we back and forth about that a little bit, and I asked him where he had slept and spent the night. And he said, quite simply, on the beach, pointing over there. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't help you any more than this, but you've got to try to be safe. It's dangerous lying across the bike path. And he looked me straight in the eye for the first time, and he said, everywhere in the world is dangerous. I was kind of shocked by this moment of certainty on his part and clarity. And indicating his having lain across the busy bike lane, I said, well, this is dangerous. And still looking at me steadily in the eyes, he said, yeah, but I'm not riding a bike. I nodded at that truth and the wisdom that went with it and wished him good luck, got back on my bike, and he started to move off and rode home with him and this talk on my mind. So I want to ask you now, what did you think about this encounter? I'm really asking you.
She saw his humanity. You saw his humanity.
I saw his humanity. I'll just repeat.
He showed compassion, kindness.
I showed compassion. Okay.
You noticed
I noticed him.
he was not invisible.
He was not invisible. Why do you think I told you this story? Well, the title of the talk is As We Go By, as we walk by, or as the book is titled, which I had the idea from, When We Walk By. And I urge you all to read this book. It's not a hard read, but it is wonderful, and it is wonderful. Okay, let me go back to the story and provide some backstory to my life. No, I like this, thank you. There was a time when I would have never stopped to help this man. There was a time when I would have just ridden by like everyone else had that day, except the woman. And she didn't even talk to him. There was a time when I would have been repulsed by the idea of that guy, a black man, or really anyone wearing really extremely dirty clothes, so clearly unkempt and of questionable mental health. If I had encountered him on the street, walking alone or with Pat, I likely would have stared at him and then averted my eyes. In either case, I would have never spoken to him. And in either case, I would have denied my own feelings. I would certainly have not been in a state of awareness or understanding of the fragility of his life, or mine for that matter. That's how my mind worked at the time. I would have simply passed by. And so the topic of my talk as we pass by, as I just said. Recently, I read another interesting book. The City is My Monastery. I like the idea of living in a monastery. This is that book. Michael, you should read this book. You'll love it. Everybody should read that book in here. Everyone. I like the idea of living in a monastery that's not what one thinks of as a monastery. My monastery is a place of movement, action, give and take, of anger, of danger. A monastery is a place of people and places. The City is My Monastery is a meditation on living within the city and working with people who are unhoused or who are purposely homeless. It was written by Richard Clark, an Anglican monk who works out of the famous St. Martin-in-the-Fields Church in central London. It's filled with his prayers, poetry, and narrative about living in the city and making it his place of worship and social action. It's filled with his descriptions of his conversations with Christ, but also with people who are alive. I mean, physically alive. Prayer, worship. I know that for many of you, this may not seem like a discussion of Zen practice, but hear me out. Carter writes, "Our monastery is here and now, where you are today, the person you're speaking with, the room you're sitting in, the street where you're walking, the action you're doing now. This is your monastery. This is your prayer. Eternity is now. The city is our monastery." I like giving talks here because, like all of you, at least those of you whom I know, which is most of you now, I presume I will, like the rest of you, wait a minute. Oh, no, sorry. It's a line I got rid of. Let me start again here. I like giving talks here because, like all of you, at least those of you who I know, because I know from previous talks that many of you appreciate them and think about them later. This may not be like most of the talks that I've given, however. I'm going to share a 5-minute video that I created. It's not pretty and may cause you some discomfort. As you watch, ask yourself what you're getting out of it. Notice your thoughts, notice your feelings. Those of us here will probably want to turn around because it's not going to be on me. Roshi, are you, I think it's
Yeah,
behind this.
I'm gonna share it from my screen here, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
That works.
Okay.
Can you make it full screen? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Yep.
try.
Yeah, just that little block in the, right there, yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Yep, okay.
Oh, where have you been, my blue-eyed son? And where have you been, my darling young one?
You know what, Roshi, can you pause it a minute and change the sound
I
to,
walked and I crawled on 6 crooked highways. I stepped in the middle of 7 side forests. I've been out in front of a dozen dead oceans. I've been 10,000 miles in the mouth of a graveyard. And it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard rain. You're gonna fall. Oh, what did you see, my blue-eyed son? And what did you see, my darling young one? Saw a newborn baby with wild wolves all around it. Saw a highway of diamonds with nobody on it. I saw a black branch with blood that kept dripping. Saw a room full of men with their hammers bleeding. I saw a white ladder all covered with water. I saw 10,000 talkers whose tongues were all broken. Saw guns and sharp swords in the hands of young children. And it's hard, it's hard, it's hard, and it's hard rain. Gonna fall. Oh, what did you hear, my blue-eyed son? And what did you hear, my darling young one? I heard the sound of a thunder that roared out a warning. Heard the roar of a wave that could drown the whole world. I heard 100 drummers whose hands were blazing. I heard 10,000 whispering and nobody listening. I heard one person starve, I heard many people laughing. I heard the song of a poet who died in the gutter. I heard the sound of a clown who cried in the alley. It's a hard, 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 it's a gonna fall. Oh, what did you meet, my blue-eyed son? Who did you meet, my darling young one? I met a young child beside a dead pony. I met a white man who walked a black dog. I met a young woman whose body was burning. I met a young girl, she gave me a rainbow. I met one man who was wounded in love. I met another man who was wounded in hatred. And it's hard, it's hard, it's hard, it's hard, it's hard rain. Hey, they're gonna fall. And what'll you do now, my blue-eyed son?
Thank you. Looking at that, so many of those people I know, the ones at the end, I consider friends. The man that I was in the picture with, his name is Terry. Terry was given that electric wheelchair. He working with Salvation Army, and I think they're trying to get him an apartment finally. He's a very sweet guy. Another one is a man that's been living on our corner by our house or our apartment for, I understand, 12, 15 years. Periodically he stabs someone because they get in his way. And he ends up in jail. He comes back and he's fine. And when he's on meds, he's particularly fine. His name is Steve, and the others. At any rate, the first and the last photograph, is the first photo I ever took of a homeless person. That was in 1966 or 67. So what did you think as you watched that video? You don't have to answer these questions. These are rhetorical questions. What feelings arose in you? How often do you simply pass by, averting your eyes, or even if you do look, simply pass on without a word? Do I truly see these individuals as fellow human beings worthy of dignity? Or have I become so inured that I filter them out as part of the urban wallpaper? Or do I even notice them at all? It's really easy to miss countless opportunities to practice moments of sincere awareness and compassion in our lives rather than passing by. Consider this rhetorical question. When was the last time the presence of a homeless neighbor on the street fully registered with you? Or did you subconsciously avert your eyes and continue on? I want you to know that I don't think it's very easy to do these things, not for me, not for most of us. I intended to have you think and feel about these things with this video. I really wanted you to suffer with me a little bit. Excuse me. I hope you did. Such thoughts, excuse me, such thoughts and feelings are at the heart of my Zen practice. My practice is one of continuous practice. Dogen covered this topic in Shobogenzo and gave the name continuous practice to a chapter, excuse me. In Japanese, the chapter is named Gyoji, which can be literally rendered as doing practice and keeping to it. So it becomes ceaseless practice. The original text had an alternate name, the ceaseless practice of the Buddhas and ancestors, Busho Gyo. In Gyo, Dogen recounts the practice of many Indian and Chinese masters. Telling these stories, and he tells them all as koans mostly, but stories too. Telling these stories, allowed Dogen to make clear that practice does not refer to some fixed agenda like sitting zazen on a daily basis, which as you already know, I clearly believe is an important practice since I've given at least 2 talks about zazen already. Dogen says that continuous practice differs in form with each of the ancient masters and yet is recognizable as continuous practice. I found myself conceptualizing and objectifying the problems of homeless in preparing for this talk. Why not? The enormity of homelessness and societal justice is overwhelming. But Dogen implies our task as practitioners is not to conceptualize solutions, but to only keep practicing with an appropriate response in each moment we encounter suffering. This appropriate response is one I cannot tell you to do or tell you how to do. It's yours in the moment and what the Buddha in the Lotus Sutra called upaya, or skillful means. I remember when I moved downtown from Park Ridge and I began to see people on the street in the heat of the summer, or huddled on street corners trying to stay warm in the midst of winter. The same people. At first, my habitual tendency was, as I said earlier, to look away and to keep moving. But then I remembered the ancestors' examples in Dogen's call. I stopped. I made eye contact and asked, "How can I help? Are you okay? Are you all right? Hey, what's up?" It was a simple act, and it was very difficult for me, but I did it. Soon after that, I read Bernie Glassman Roshi's book, Infinite Circle. We must include everything we encounter into our ever-expanding circle, he says. Our circles become infinite. Those circles are not just physical. If we stay rooted in presence, we can move beyond the veils of assumptions, privilege, and disconnect that bind us, particularly those of us with spiritual connection, because we often use our own spiritualism as a mechanism for specialness, what Trungpa called spiritual materialism. With continually renewed awareness, dropping off our beliefs in ourselves as different, we can't help but see those suffering before us. As I said, and as I learned, and as Dogen knew, this work of continuously practicing awareness is far from easy. Old patterns of indifference, separation, and turning away is a powerful inertia to overcome. But the gift is to remain malleable and responsive in each moment. No matter how many times we veer off the practice path, we can start again. We can choose to see everything that is in our midst, the everything that is in our midst, and meet it head on. And we can meet them with the full force of our personal expression of Dogen's ideal, the ceaseless practice of compassion. This is in our Mahayana vow, isn't it? Creations are numberless, I vow to free them. Speaking of the Mahayana, in response to the question of why did Bodhidharma come from the West, the 19th century Zen master Joshu, who was with the dog in Mu, many of you know this, same Joshu responded when asked, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? The cypress tree in the garden. When we see in so many koans the question, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? It's code for what is the meaning of Zen, or why do we practice Zen? So in pointing to the cypress tree in the courtyard or the garden as an answer to why did Bodhidharma come from the West, Joshu is saying that the tree is more than just the tree. That tree is only there because it's the tree that the monk sees. In other words, this is a description of emptiness, of the reality of life, that all we see is due to our perceptions. Yes, the tree is there, physically. You could hug it or stub your toe against it. But the tree you see and hug is not the same tree that I see and hug, even though physically it appears to be the same tree. What if Joshu, to the question of why did Bodhidharma come from the West, had said, the homeless woman on the corner? How would that have awakened the monk? Would that have meant more to you? Maybe so, maybe not. Dogen taught that each of us can perceive Buddha nature. Our Buddha nature that we're born with might be all the things in the 10 directions, everything, the entire universe. Dogen says that Buddha nature is also radiant light. This radiant light, he says, is the universe shining within each thing, all of us. However, our habitual patterns often blind us to this truth. It's there. When we encounter a homeless person on the street, it's all too easy to see only their destitution, dirt, and suffering, seeming separation from society. It's easy to imagine their hopelessness. Yet, if we can sustain practicing Dogen's teaching of continuous awareness, we may be able to glimpse that same brilliant radiance within them. As difficult as those video images may be, it's important to remember that behind each face, each person living on the streets, there burns a radiant inner light, the same light that exists within each and every one of us. It's the spark of our shared humanity that transcends external circumstances. It's the essence of who we as people are, our hopes, our dreams, resilience, inherent worth as human beings. Just as we all long for joy, connection, and meaning in our lives, so do those without shelter. They want the same things we do. Their light may be dimmed by the tremendous challenges they faced, but it's not extinguished. In opening our hearts to recognize this radiant inner light in others, we can cultivate greater compassion. We can see past the surface level differences and remember that we are united by our common human experience underneath it all. By using the metaphor of the radiant light within each of us can encapsulate the essence of our shared hopes, dignity, and fundamental sameness, despite vastly different outward realities. It drives home a salient point, that we must look past exterior appearances to truly see one another. That's what is meant by oneness. Let me read that again. The salient point, that we must look past exterior appearances to truly see one another. That's what is meant by oneness. Dogen implies that it is this radiant light, this Buddha nature shared by all, that makes every being worthy of our compassionate response in each moment. If we stay rooted in presence and continuously attuned to our awareness, the veils of prejudice and disconnect may fall away. We can't help but perceive the fundamental radiance animating every homeless neighbor we encounter. No matter how afflicted or forgotten someone may appear, we should seek out their innate radiance, this continuous practice that they have as well. Just don't know it, perhaps. I'll tell you, it's not easy for me to recognize that what a person on the street corners experiences is no different from what I'm experiencing. It really isn't very easy, but it's true. Maybe the specifics are different, but the totality is the same. They're experiencing hope, fear, anxiety, sadness, happiness. You saw happy faces too, right? I think I can be fairly certain that they're worried about where their next full meal may come from, however, or where they're going to spend the next night, many of them, or when they may have their next shower, whether whatever they have as possessions are safe as well. I may not share those specifics, but I can share the angst of not having the assurance of my health, which they too must have angst. I can share that I have been without the opportunity for a shower for several weeks when I lived in Afghanistan, and it was miserable. When I see that person on the street, I no longer think the worst, which I certainly used to do. Now I think how we all are suffering and struggling in our own specific ways. I am they, and they are me. I now see how the ancestors' continuous practice extended far beyond the meditation hall. It flowed into every circumstance of daily life. In his day, the Buddha saw and worked with those marginalized in society, those who lost a child, those who stole, those who murdered, those who were in poverty, those who were severely ill. So let's turn to today, focusing on the issues of homelessness and housing insecurity. They're both a racial and a poverty issue. Both are deeply intertwined, according to the literature that I've read. For example, The Color of Law, which is another book I wanted to share. It describes in critical detail the ways that redlining, do you know what redlining is? Okay, many of you do, good. So I'm not going to go on, but you can look it up, redlining, if you don't know. He describes the detail, the ways that redlining in communities has prevented many people of color from being able to move into areas that offer better opportunities for their families. Social policies and systemic inequalities play a significant role in perpetuating racial and economic disparities in housing and homelessness. Historical policies such as redlining, which denied housing opportunities to people of color, continue to this day to have lasting effects on housing access and affordability. Policies related to housing assistance, urban development, and criminal justice disproportionately impact communities of color, contributing to their higher rates of poverty and homelessness. People of color, particularly Black, Indigenous, and Hispanic individuals and communities, are disproportionately affected by poverty and homelessness. Historical and systemic factors such as discrimination, segregation, economic disparities, unequal access to opportunities have contributed to these disparities. According to various studies and statistics, people of color are overrepresented among those experiencing homelessness. You saw that in the photos. Homelessness and housing insecurity they're all higher compared to their white counterparts. Poverty rates are higher among racial minorities, and poverty often exacerbates housing instability and homelessness. Factors such as limited access to affordable housing, discriminatory lending practices, and unequal employment opportunities and disparities in education and healthcare contribute to the cycle of poverty and homelessness among marginalized groups, particularly racial groups. The intertwined issues of racial disparities and poverty requires us to examine complex interactions between race, poverty, including intersecting factors such as gender, gender identification, drug dependence, disability, and immigration status now. I want to end by sharing with you some facts and insights about those marginalized, those living on the streets, those living in cars or abandoned buildings, those without work, and those with work but still on the streets or living in cars or on couches that aren't their homes. Obviously, homeless and jobless people mostly live in poverty. They experience relational poverty as well. As we walk by without acknowledging them, we add to this relational poverty. Relational poverty. We don't have it in here. We know one another. We talk to one another. We have relationships. People on the street have almost no one. That's relational poverty. And imagine now you have a job, but you're living on the street. You're living in a car. Your relational poverty has just completely disintegrated. It caused your whole life to disintegrate. Further, most homeless people lack any social network and are most commonly estranged from their families. And because they don't work, they have no work-related social network. The social poverty is critical. If someone is a paycheck away from being evicted without a social network, many have nowhere to go. And so that reminds me of the other book you should read, Evicted. And if you haven't, it's wonderful. I have to admit, I've only read that far, but I will finish it. My wife says, finish that book, finish that book. So, eviction. Those who are socially isolated are significantly more likely to die earlier than their socially connected peers. A 2015 meta-analysis found that experiences of social isolation, loneliness, or living alone were associated with a 26 to 32% increased likelihood of early mortality. Wow. Prolonged isolation is estimated to decrease a person's lifespan by 15 years, equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes today. And we know for heavy smokers, 3/4 of a pack a day is nothing. So just extrapolate that. The rate of homelessness among older adults, many of us here are older adults. Many of you online are older adults. The rate of homelessness among older adults is also increasing. Half of single homeless adults are over 50, and older adults are particularly susceptible to relational and social poverty. Nearly 25% of adults over 65 are socially isolated. Now get this. Loneliness and social isolation lead to a shorter life and lower quality of life. Among older adults, loneliness and social isolation are associated with higher rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide, as well as a 50% increased risk of dementia, a 29% increased rate of heart disease, and a 32% increased risk of stroke. Earlier, I alluded to how we perceive others. Some of this is related to a concept known as confirmation bias. This is something I just learned about. Based on assumptions, we think all people experiencing homelessness are the same, but it's simply not true. Today, many young LGBTQ+ people are homeless. We don't notice them as being homeless. Forced to leave their families because they have not felt accepted or have been thrown out. These persons may live in cars, on friends' couches, or in unacceptable locations, and still may be going to school or work. This differs from what we have believed that all homeless are as individuals, mostly single men panhandling with cardboard signs, or people in tattered clothes pushing shopping carts with all of their possessions, or an older woman talking to herself. Yet less than 40% of all people experiencing homelessness are unsheltered, living on the street. That means that 3 out of 5 people experiencing homelessness are totally imperceptible as to what most of us think of as the homeless. So I'm going to end just with, I don't know. I thought I would end, but maybe I won't. What could we do as socially active Buddhists? But I think I'm just going to stop. Maybe we could talk about that. You want me to hear me say that? I think I should stop. Yeah, I want to stop now. We've heard a lot. I just want to read you a poem to end with. Just talking about this breaks my heart. Really breaks my heart. This is called Bleeding Heart by Carmen Jimenez. My heart is bleeding. It bleeds upward and fills my mouth up with salt. It bleeds because of a city in ruins, the chair still warm from sister's body, because it will all be irreproducible. My heart bleeds because of baby bear not finding mama bear. It bleeds to the tips of my fingers like I painted my nails crimson. Sometimes my heart bleeds so much I'm a raisin. It bleeds until I'm a quivering, ragged clot. Bleeds at the ending with the heroine and her sunken cancer eyes, at the ending with the plaintive fluke over smoke-chilled killing fields. I'm bleeding a river of blood right now, and it's wearing a culvert in me for the blood. My heart rises up in me, becomes the cork of me, and I choke. I'm bleeding for you and me, for the tiny babies and the IED blown leg. It bleeds because I'm made that way, all filled up with blood. My sloppy heart, a sponge filled with blood to squeeze into any circumstance. Because it is mine, it will always bleed. My heart bled today. It bled onto the streets and the steps of City Hall. It bled in the pizza parlor with the useless jukebox. I've got so much blood to give inside and outside of any milieu, even for a bad zoning decision. I'll bleed so much you'll be bleeding, all of us bleeding in and out like it's breathing or kissing, and because it's righteous and terrible and red. Thanks for listening and participating.
Those of you online, feel free to go ahead and unmute if you have a comment, question, those here in the room, I'm happy to pass the mic. We have Linda here.
Well, Dorothy Day used to say, if every family in the country would take in one homeless person, there wouldn't be enough to go around.
Who used to say that?
Dorothy Day? But I'm not so sure that's true anymore. I know when I go down Lake Street, I don't see the isolated homeless person asking for $1. Now I see women and their small children. 2 and 3 groups every block.
Yeah.
There's, I'm not sure how to say this. The teaching of interdependence, that we are all interrelated. I am you and you are me. Mm-hmm. That is, for me, that is the very essence of Zen. And all the misery in the world, whether it be homeless people, abused people, wars. There's 11 wars going on in the world right now, even though we only hear about 2 of them. What caused World War II? Vietnam, I mean, it wasn't politics, it wasn't race, it wasn't religion, it was one thing. One cause for most of the misery and suffering in the world. Goes back to the essence of Zen and our apparent inability to see that we are all interrelated, that I am you and you are me. I believe that's the cause of most things. It's also one of the most difficult things there is to do. But they actually believed it and worked it.
Right. It's hard.
Oh,
I
yes.
kept saying it. It's hard.
Oh, yes. Look
Yeah.
look at the person in the world that you can't stand the most, whether it be, your ex or some politician or something, and say, that's me. What most people forget to say is, if he is in me, remember, I'm in him. Mm-hmm. We take a vow to save all sentient beings. The first time I learned that, I thought, really? That is overwhelming, just as your presentation can be overwhelming with the problem. But to me, to save all sentient beings is an appropriate response. Start with the one in front of you.
Thank you, Linda. Just want to comment about the women on the streets with children. These are immigrants, of course, and it effing breaks my heart. And I think how much I hate Greg Abbott, and yet I am Greg Abbott, and Greg Abbott is me. Okay. Somebody else?
We have online. Go right ahead.
Who's waving their arm?
Good morning, my friends, my Zen friends, and Mark. This is Patricia.
Oh, hi.
And Mark, I felt your talk across the miles and space in this world we share. I felt it very deeply. And I want to say thank you for that. I think it's really important that we continue to feel our broken hearts so that we might bring up a glimmer of our own humanity by which we can see anyone else in front of us. But I'm just reminded, yesterday I went to do my pickup at King Soopers for groceries. And where we do pickup there's very often individuals who are lost, are unhoused, are by whatever definition not apparently connected. And I think your use of the word relational poverty is so keen and important to understand in this world in terms of how we see each other. And so as I sat there waiting for my pickup, there was a woman who came up and approached me and said, "Don't I know you?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." "Well, I'm hungry," she said. And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't have any dollars with me. Sorry, I just have my cards." And she said, "Well, I think I know you." And I said, "Well, I don't know you." And in that moment, I made her poor, and who actually was poor in the moment. I have nothing else to say. I'm very brokenhearted. Our city just passed a new ruling to ban people from camping down by the creek. We really want them just to disappear. And I'm gonna try to make my vow this moment that I'm gonna stop that disappearing kind of thing for both myself and for her. So thank you.
Thank you, my dear, dear friend. I miss you so much. Thank you for that. Let me just comment about one thing. You know, I don't carry money anymore, rarely. Pat and I always forget to even take a few dollars, but so many people have said to me, "Well, you've got a credit card, can you just go into Dunkin' Donuts and get me a coffee and something to eat?" And once or twice I've done that, and you know, I think it would cost me a fortune, but what's a fortune really compared to what they don't have? Anyway, thanks, Patricia.
Just a quick, hi, Mark, it's Steve.
Oh, Steve, hi.
One of the things in hearing about, it's a very simple solution to not carrying money. My wife and I make sure that we have dollar bills in the compartment in our car so that we do have cash to hand out when we're getting off the expressway, particularly that group that we know we're going to run into, particularly when with our car. I mean, you know, hearing the talk and feeling the compassion. I once heard someone talking about that compassion and empathy without action is still no change. And I think, you know, some of hearing, it's overwhelming to try to imagine how do we address that because there are so many people in our presence. So a small action is to make sure I have at least 20 singles sitting in my car, and at least it creates some kind of sense of trying to do something. So I just wanted to share that.
And if I could just comment on that too. I used to believe when in my old days that if I gave money, they were just going to take drugs.
Okay.
But actually, mostly that's not true.
Right.
Most of the people you see are not on drugs. They are among the people who similarly take drugs. They are not on the corners. Thanks, Steve. Great to see you. Hi.
Yes, same here, Mark.
Adrian?
I've never been here before. My name is Adrian. I am a practicing Quaker. I would like to point out, because this is something that I do with my Quaker meeting, in Oak Park, there is Housing Forward. And it used to be pads, and we used to,
Speak just a touch.
it used to be pads, and we used to make dinner at St. John Lutheran Church on Friday nights. Not every Friday, we're a small group. Now we make dinner and we deliver it to the Right Inn where these homeless people are living because Housing Forward is working so hard to bring people under their umbrella. And that option of volunteering, of helping an organization that's right here in Oak Park, if you're from Oak Park or even from somewhere else, is open to every single person.
Thank you.
I admit I am not a person who gives out money. I sometimes feel threatened when I ride the green line or the blue line. I admit that. But it's one thing that I'm able to do, and I'm not trying to preach, I'm just sharing a practice that I participate in. And specifically what I do is I make good cookies. Because how often do homeless people get good cookies? I mean, with real butter and real eggs and, you know, so that's my particular little contribution. So, like I said, not trying to preach, just there are things you can do.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just two more questions.
Yeah, we're about at time, so we have someone online.
Earl? No, whoever
no.
that is.
It's Barry.
Barry, hi.
Barry, oh, sorry.
So there are other, possibilities for, contributing to homelessness, to alleviate homelessness. There's a Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, which, that you can sign up to make monthly donations, which I've been doing for some years. And the Greater Chicago Food Depository is another resource, and then you're contributing, and it's not being used for drugs or alcohol. And it's just another way to, take a stab at the problem.
There's also the Night Ministry of Chicago, which is an outreach program, which is terrific too.
Mm.
Yeah, Blair, right here.
Last
Thank you for
question.
that, Barry.
Well, just on this subject, in Oak Park, there's the community fridge, which is located across the street from Euclid Avenue United Methodist Church. It's on Euclid and just south of Washington. And just donate, you got extra food, just put it in the refrigerator or on the shelf, and people come and pick it up.
Thank you for that, Blair.
Thank you all
And
for participating.
Yeah, thank you all of you for staying past time. We so appreciate you being there. Those of you who are in the room or those of you online who can be here, please join us for Kinship Hour. Thank you everyone for being here today. Have a lovely Sunday. Thank you, Mark.